Hello, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to Beyond the Art and our series, The Stories That Carry Us. I'm your host, Craig Beaumont Flynn, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the Delaware Tribe of Indians. In each episode, we will discuss with various Native American artists, influencers, art leaders, and everyone in between their experiences, the communities they serve, and the translation and interpretation of the Native American art world today. Welcome to Beyond the Art today, and we have as our guest Bobby C. Martin, a Muskogee Creek Nation citizen, printmaker, encaustic painter, visual arts professor, and much more. Good morning, Bobby.
Good morning.
How are you? Oh, I'm glad to have you on the show. So tell us a little about the story of Bobby C. Martin.
Oh my, well, it's a long, rough story, but it's not that bad. I've had a really blessed life, I have to say. Started out as a musician. I wanted to be a rock star up until I was about mid-20s. I actually ran a recording studio in Tahlequah, Oklahoma for several years and recorded some of the original Red Dirt guys back in the day, and still play music. But at some point along there, decided to swap the starving musician for a starving artist.
One extreme to the other.
I sold the recording studio and then decided to go back to school, back to university, and went to Northeastern in Tahlequah. Got a undergrad degree and then ended up getting my grad degree at University of Arkansas. And then went immediately to work. And by then I was in my mid-30s and I still was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And went to work for Gilcrease Museum right out of grad school as their a cool title of artist in residence. Which was kind of following the footsteps of like Woody Crumbo and A.C. Blue Eagle and some of those amazing classic names of native art. But what I was really in was the one-person graphic design department, and which was great. I loved the job, and then ended up continued to do art and worked at Gilcrease. Then eventually got into teaching. Taught at Northeastern, and now teaching at John Brown University in Siloam Springs. I've been doing that for the past 22 years or so, and then continuing to do art. So I'm in my studio right now. So I've been blessed to be able to have a studio where I can make art and do projects in my art career. Besides the teaching gig is my day gig now, and I'm still doing the art. So it's been a great ride. And right now I'm 30 years into an art career, making a living with art. So it's been amazing.
So what is your perspective of being a Native American artist?
When I first got into it, back in this would have been the early 90s, there was a very specific kind of a look you were kind of expected to do, like flat style, with teepees and bareback riders on horseback, and which is great. I love that old traditional flat style. That's really kind of in some people's minds kind of stereotypical for that time, but I had no reference point for that. That was not part of. I grew up in Tahlequah. I never rode a horse in my life, so it was kind of for me. It was a searching for what should native art be, and so as I've been involved in it, I've also seen native art itself sort of evolve from kind of what would have been seen as sort of the stereotypical expectations to now it's really wide open, and the growth of it too. I mean, you're seeing artists that are getting major shows in major museums that didn't happen 30 years ago. So just the growth of native art, not only in its breadth of styles and approaches, but also the notice that people are taking of native art now is really, I think, exciting to see, because that hasn't happened in the same kind of way.
In the same context that, from early on, roadside Native American art per se, there's very strict parameters. Now it's such a wide spectrum of type of art and various mediums being applied. And I think for the audience and collector, there's more of a choice, more of a story being told instead of just a singular Native American story.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And you're getting to see that work into a lot bigger platforms than you've ever had before. Like
Right.
you said, major museums are starting to take notice that contemporary Native artists should be seen and heard in ways that they haven't been before. So that's been super encouraging. I mean, not that they've been ignored totally, but I mean, it feels like, especially over the last 5-10 years, and even the last couple of years, with major museums in New York City and other places that are starting to really take notice of contemporary Native art.
So when did it come to you? It's like, oh, I'm an artist. When did that little light flash in your head?
Well, I mean, I always knew I could draw little things that looked like, everybody was impressed when you do
Right,
it.
right.
From your parents to then when you go to school and you draw a little stuff, and it's like, oh, look, your classmates would say. But I really didn't get interested in even think about making art seriously until my dad had ordered these back in the day. They had these correspondence course things,
I remember.
um,
Yes,
and he
I
ordered
remember
this
exactly.
whole 3-ring binder thing full of all this cartooning correspondence lessons. And
Right.
he worked with it for a little bit, and then he gave up. I was probably about 9 or 10 at the time, but I sort of inherited this book and started drawing, and it was like, oh, this is cool. And then, of course, get into teenager, and then the rock star desire hit, and suddenly art didn't mean anything to me anymore. And it wasn't really until way into adulthood, when I did go back to school, probably in my late 20s, that I thought, I would, maybe this art thing is something I could pursue.
Mhm.
I, I didn't know if I could make a living at it or anything like that. It just has turned out that it's, been blessed to be able to do that. But I think it wasn't until much later in adulthood until I rediscovered, I guess, that I had this desire, and then an ability that God had given me to be able to actually do it. And it's been a cool, a lot of it is it's not about the art for me as much as it's been about sort of the identity and discovery of who I was as a Native person. And I've just been
Mhm.
able to explore that through making art. And that's been really a cool trip, an interesting journey.
Well, you described yourself as having your hand in multiple areas of doing various types of art. What do you feel is coming from your soul? What is it? Painting? Is it printmaking? Is it drawing?
I don't know. I think making generally, just being
Mhm.
able to make stuff.
Creating.
Creating, the creative part of it is really where it comes from for me, from my soul, and from the whatever well that I get to draw from is this just a
Mhm.
creative um, process. And then sometimes that creative process takes the form of a screen print or an etching or whatever it might be. Sometimes it takes the form of an encaustic painting. Sometimes it takes the form of, I just finished a big mural project in Tulsa at Council Oak healthcare facility
I've
that
seen it.
involved, yeah, thanks, and involved, kind of a
Beautiful.
multiple mediums.
Mhm.
And then sometimes occasionally it's just writing things. I write um, uh, here and there, not a lot of stuff,
Right.
but it's, yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't pin my creative output on one single thing. It just kind of, and the teaching, I have to say, the teaching has been like a huge part of my creative um, blessing. Or what did you say, the identity, the soul? Yeah,
The
I mean,
soul, yeah.
the soul of just being able to share what I've learned with other people, especially young people, college students, and to see their creative journey just kind of energizes me. And that's probably one reason I'm
Mhm.
still doing that after all these years, that there's still something very energizing about teaching others and watching them discover their way.
Correct. I think you're energized and it's a collective, so you're actually learning. You might be
Hmm.
teaching, but you're also learning from new and
Exactly.
aspiring artists, and they're
Yep.
bringing new methods to you,
Hmm.
which I think is very, significant. Talk about Council Oak because I have seen that piece. What inspired you for that piece? Were you directed? or was it something you just saw the blank wall and you had an idea that kind of came to?
Well, it was directed in a sense that they wanted the commission was tell we want to tell the story, or at least show the history of Council Oak, the actual tree that is, down
Right.
the downtown, that is
Mm-hmm.
basically the founding of Tulsa. And so that was my guidance. Was, we want to do something that talks about, and as I was thinking about it, I'm sure as you think about any kind of sort of a specific place, there's a lot of history that goes along with that. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was like exploring what is that history. I knew about the oak tree, and I knew the significance of it, but I didn't know as much of the history of where it came from, like the tribal town that came out of Alabama and brought the council the ashes from their council fire and then rekindled it under this tree.
Correct. Yeah.
And then that's where. And so if you think about that's, yes, it's the founding of Tulsa, but it's also about the history of the Muskogee tribe itself, the resilience that's involved with that, the blossoming of the tribe, even through all the bad stuff, all the hardships, and then it also obviously encompasses the history of Tulsa and the history of Oklahoma, for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Very
So all
true.
this was wrapped up into this story of Council Oak. Kind of
A
was
lot to
was
say in a painting.
yeah, a lot to say. I mean, I think there was end up a total of like 26 or 27 panels altogether in that mural. It's not really, it is a mural, but it's more like a site specific installation, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That hopefully is telling the story of a people, of the Muskogee tribe that have, that starts, for at least for this piece, it starts at forced removal in Alabama and Georgia, and then ends up under this amazing oak tree that still stands. And so, yeah, that was a really cool process. And wasn't just me either. I had a great team. I had
Mm-hmm.
a friend of mine who did a lot of helped me do the research, and it was the first project I've ever been able to be a large enough project that I could hire studio assistants. So it was like, hey, I'm a real artist now. I got to get studio assistants. And they helped me a ton. It was a lot of several of my JBU students helped. And so I get to give them a lot of credit for kind of collaborating. And then the folks at Council Oak were just really supportive and really gave me the lead to go, do it. Here's our basic idea. You do whatever you want to with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really freeing and kind of just an amazing opportunity, I think.
So, what inspires you in creating pieces, and what is that process to get it from your head to hand to actual end product?
I think a lot of the inspiration, at least for me, over the past 30 years of doing this, has come from family. A lot of my work, not all of it, but a good chunk of it, and that's kind of how I've become known now, is using old family photos in my work. And I think initially I didn't really think about it other than they were really cool old photos. But over the years, as I've shown them, because when I first did it, I thought, well, in a couple of years, it's kind of fun to use these old photos, but I'll run out of photos after a bit, and I'll move on to something else. But now here I am, almost 30 years later, I'm still using these same photos, and I keep going back to that well. I think because there's something so, well, for me, obviously, it is very soul fulfilling because
Mhm.
it's my family. But over
Correct.
the years, I've found that these people, they're not just my family; they're anybody's family. And as I put them out there in whatever form, whether it's a painting or a print or whatever, and as I talk to people and show this work, it's an opportunity to talk about not only my own identity, but their own identity and family and their experiences. I don't know how many times people have said, "Well, that looks just like my aunt or my grandma
Right.
or whoever," and that gets that conversation started about this commonality I guess we all have as humans, but as just people that have a family story and a history. And for me, I think that's been really amazing and fulfilling, that I can't get away from it. So I'm continuing to use these same images And every once in a while, pretty regularly actually, when I get together with relatives and cousins and stuff, they'll pull out some more images that I haven't seen before. And it's like there's more source material to work with. But I think that's I guess it kind of boils down to identity, maybe as much as anything. Is I've been really, initially searching for who I was as a not just a native artist, maybe just as a native person
Hmm.
generally, because I mean I didn't grow up in any kind of traditional household or anything like that. Um, so I think the identity thing has then grown into something that's become a bigger story for me as I show it and talk about it to
A little bit more self-reflection of your own DNA.
yeah, self-reflection initially, but I think it's become something bigger than that now. It's become something that I hope anyway that a lot of people create self-reflection in them too when they're seeing
Hmm.
this work. And as I talk to people, that's been the case, and that's why I think that's why I continue to sort of uh, go pull from this well so frequently, because it's just that I don't know, it's very fulfilling to be able to use my own imagery of my own family in ways that can you know maybe minister or help other
Right,
people. I
right.
mean, because right now, like this big painting, I don't know if you when you were in and saw the Council Oak thing, the lady that's the big painting that's behind the counter when you first go in,
Yes, yes.
that's my mom. So
Oh, okay. All
So
right,
that painting, I didn't when I painted that, I had no idea where it was going to end up or anything.
right.
And the title of it is called "But You Don't Look Indian," which I've heard, quite a bit over the years, especially at native art markets where there was a certain expectation of what you
Exactly.
painted and what you look like, right?
That
Um,
stereotype, yeah.
yeah. But anyway, but just to know that she's in there welcoming people in this place of healing, and they want to know about who is that, and what does that mean, what is that painting, and what's all this about. So those kind of things, just being able to use my own family and family photos in ways that can, I don't know, hopefully uh, help people, or at least that people can identify with, has really been
Hmm.
a great thing for me.
So when you take that photo or have that idea that you're going to use a particular photograph of your family or others, what's your process in creating the painting or the piece of art that you're focusing on from that image?
Um, it really kind of depends on. Uh, I have a whole bunch of all these old photos scanned, and it
Mhm.
usually starts in the computer, which is I kind of like the fact that a lot of my designing and stuff starts with a digital file and plays around and get put in Photoshop and do all these layers and stuff to it. Because really, that's what I've always liked in creating art is this layering of things, and so that's why
Mhm.
a lot of my work there's other material kind of layered in the backgrounds like maps and words and DAWs roll names and all this sort of history maybe that is mixed in with the photos. And so I love to create these layering, whether it's layering
Mhm.
physically layering. That's when I first discovered Photoshop and layers. It was like, oh, this is super cool. I could actually layer things and have things show through to other things below, and that was like
Right.
I could tell multiple stories in the same piece of art. But I never was really pleased with. I mean, really, all you can do is like print it out on a piece of paper. I mean, it's great. I
Mhm.
mean, computer prints and G-Clay prints, all that stuff, that's awesome. But it's still just ink on paper printed by a machine. I was really
Correct.
wanting. I was really wanting to find a way to layer things by hand. As especially kind of trained in grad school as a printmaker. So yeah, when I take the process is usually I'll take these digital images and play around with them, move them around, and layer things in them, and then figure out, okay, now how do I take all these digital layers and make them real, make them physical? And a lot of times that's where the encaustic stuff comes in, the wax layers, because
Correct.
I can take this material and physically layer things. I can collage actual pieces of you know paper or old maps or whatever. I can paint into it. I can scratch
Mhm.
into it. I must build in this layer cake of, of of information and imagery.
Right.
I guess for me, it is about layering, and then in caustic too. The wax, it's just basically beeswax mixed with a resin that kind of keeps it from getting too brittle, and it creates this automatic sort of feeling of time as you layer it on there. So each layer you put down, it feels like you're adding another 50 years or something
Right,
onto it.
another element and building upon it.
So it becomes this really cool way of creating this built up
kind of depth, I guess you could say.
Yeah, there's an actual depth, but it looks, even when you see it, even though it's it's really physically it's not very deep, but it feels like it's a lot deeper than it really is. So I really, and I do that a lot with even with printmaking and things too. There's something about that, and I love 2D work. I've never really thought too much about doing 3-dimensional stuff, although I have dabbled with that. But I really like that sort of the depth that you get even just in a painting or a print on a wall, if you can work it like that. So I guess that's part of my process, is trying to figure out how to create this sense of, and depth could be depth that's created through, because I like the idea of being able to have an image, have a photo of, say, my mom or some old family member, but have all this other stuff going on around it or in the background. So there's a lot of stories that are going on. Yeah, you could look at it and just say, "Oh, well, that looks like my grandma." But
Right.
if you look a little deeper, you can see other things going on in the layers around that image too. So
That's fantastic.
that's part of the process, I think, is just, and that came over time too. First, initially, it was just, these are cool old photos. My mom and some of her, my aunties, her sisters took a bunch of these great pictures, and they were just snapshots, but they're so cool. They were so well cropped and
Right.
arranged. They were good for time.
Well,
So in that sense, I guess I'm collaborating with them. They never knew that when they were taking the photos, but now here I am, 50 plus years later, as a collaborator with my family that took the photos, which is,
right.
which to me is another kind of a layer of of something that I like to think about is, that they they're providing me with the means to be able to
To
do the
create
art.
your artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, early on, photography, in its essence, wasn't really an art form. It was more of a capturing a moment, but
Hmm.
now it's progressed, obviously, to an art form, and it's kind of interesting that you're taking something that was just capturing that moment and kind of translating and reinterpreting it into an art piece per se,
Yeah.
which I think is very distinctive of what maybe defines you and your work a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's kind of been what I've become known for, is those old family photos. I mean, I've done other things too, but
Mhm.
I just always can kind of continue to come back to those great images of family, you know.
So, what do you have an artistic influencer?
Influencer?
Yeah. Do you think it's your students that you teach? Are they your influencers, or is it from your surroundings? Besides the fact of old photographs and things like that, is there other avenues that influence your artwork?
I think you're right. I think my students, I don't think they influence the style of the art. They do influence my, just to create, keeping those creative juices flowing, because I have to, keep up with them. So but
Right.
just being around that sort of creative interplay and those creative forces really just kind of keep you creative. I think if I was
Mhm.
just sitting in my studio all day, I'd probably get less done because I'm naturally sort of lazy anyway. So it's like, yeah, well, I don't have anything going on right now, but I might get to it later. But I think being around, these young people that they're just craving to be, figure out ways to get their ideas down, kind of
Correct, correct.
makes you really kind of charges you up too. And I'm blessed to have some things that keeps me kind of going and wanting to produce stuff, is just having a place like the studio here to be able to
Mhm.
create in. I didn't for many years. I didn't have that, and a lot of artists don't have that
Right.
that dedicated space that they can call their studio. And I think for me, that's a huge part of being able to and maybe it comes back a little bit to that identity thing too. Yeah, okay, I'm a studio. I'm an artist. I need to, I have a responsibility
You got to
to
produce.
produce. Yeah, and then just like and some of it is just the natural ebb and flow of an artist's life anyway, which means
Hmm.
deadlines drive you to be creative. So right now I'm frantically trying to get some stuff done for the Muskogee Art Market that starts this Saturday or Friday. Actually, I got to turn in the work for it by Friday. So yeah, so those kind of things for a lot of artists like
Push
myself
you.
push you to stay creative and stay producing. So yeah,
Right.
but I think a lot of what really, besides the family photos, I've been, we've got a little piece of property out here in the middle of nowhere, Adair County, that's just, it really feels um, very, I don't know, I draw some kind of creative energy just from being home,
Hmm.
from a
That makes
place.
sense. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Do you feel that you take challenges and risk with your artwork? Or does your students push you to take challenges or risk?
Um, Sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that. Yeah, I think just, what I think it is I push them to take challenges and risks, and and then it's like, well, if you're going to push them, then why aren't you pushing
Yeah.
yourself, kind of thing. So yeah, I probably, that's a good question though, because I feel like, well, I've been doing basically the same sort of thing for a lot of years. Why didn't I branch out? And I have branched out. I've
Mhm.
got some other little, other, not little things, but things like I've got I've got Clyde here. In fact, he's watching over me now as but he's showed up in a lot of different. He shows up. He was in the mural at Council Oaks, so he's kind of a diversion away from the purely the family photo stuff. But I don't know. I guess I've been blessed enough to been able to do kind of whatever I want. And I think part of that's maybe, I mean, people would say, well, yeah, I've got the teaching gig that I don't have to
Mhm.
do the same kind of art to make sure I have sales all the time. So that's been a great uh, positive for me, that I could kind of make the art I wanted to make. And I guess I kind of have. I mean, I guess maybe I haven't. I mean, you think about some artists that just kind of go try all kinds of things.
Mhm.
I've just been kind of happy applying but I guess it's been a constant sort of identity search, and I guess if nothing else, I've continued to add things from whatever I've learned over the years that have then shown up in the work.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. I mean, I asked what inspires you, but what motivates you to create?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, for me, I guess, especially lately, it's just the love of being able to continue to do it. I mean, it feels like now, you know, 30 years in, I'm just feel like I'm just now getting where I could get some really interesting projects. Well, like the mural, but all these some other things that I've been working on. That
Mhm.
a studio. I mean, I've only had a full on dedicated studio for the last maybe 10 years or less. Out of those 30. So I think just I guess I guess what keeps me going is I still enjoy. I still love doing it, and I'm actually, now that I'm really close to retiring. I'm going to probably retire in a year and a half or so, 2 years, God willing. Then I'm going to really try and kick in full on with the art, which I've never really done. I mean, I made enough to make a living with, but not
Mhm.
where you just say, okay, I'm going to be an artist. That's all I'm going to do.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I'm sure I'll miss the teaching, and I'm probably still going to. In fact, we're just getting ready to build a bigger studio out back here, that I'm going to be doing workshops and things, because probably won't be able to ever get away from the sort of the teaching, the desire to sort of show people stuff
Right,
and
right.
share stuff. So I'll probably continue to do that. But I don't know. I think it's just been I mean, I can't think of anything cooler than being able to, you know,
Just do your art, your
Have a
craft.
space to make art and then go show it, and people, sometimes will actually spend their own money on it and stuff like that. I don't thankfully I don't have to rely on the sales.
Right.
I have some friends that do. I don't have to rely on that. So that kind of gives me that freedom to be able to kind of pick and choose and do the things that I really want to be doing.
So I know some artists have milestones or goals they want to set throughout their career, their artistic career. Do you have any milestones or goals that you've achieved so far or still are on the plate in the horizon?
I have I've always been a go with the flow kind of person, I
Yeah.
guess. Maybe a lot of artists are probably like that. I mean, a lot of people are like that.
Take
I
each
haven't
day as
ever
it comes.
Yeah, I haven't been a goal setter, although some of the things I've been able to do have been, I mean, I've worked toward them. One of the things that I've got to do that I kind of had wanted to do for a long time was curate shows, and so I've been
Mhm.
able to curate some traveling exhibitions that have toured around the country, and that was something I really didn't expect to do, but as I've got the opportunity, it's sort of like, oh, okay, this seems like a path that I want to try and go down.
Right.
Whether it was a goal I set, I'm not sure. It's just kind of one of those, like you said, one of those things that sort of whatever crosses your path or whatever your hands find to do. Um, I would a goal for me at this stage in my life right now would be, as I kind of move into this, hopefully more of a full time artist retirement gig. Be able to share the studio space that I have with other people that want to learn about printmaking or whatever I can share with them. So I guess the goal would be to continue to make art, continue to make get opportunities to show and uh, projects I would love. And I haven't set this as a goal because I feel like every time I set a goal, it's like nah, I'm still going to do the go with the flow thing. But a
Right.
goal would be, if I want to call it a goal, and I would love to be able to continue to do more of these like public art, these large scale projects, because that was really
Mhm.
fun. It's really fun to me. It's fun to be able to bring other people in, because a lot of times, a lot of us artists we just kind of sit around and do our thing by ourselves in a corner or
Correct.
something.
You're working in a silo and very focused to
Right. So
what's
this is a
coming from
great
you.
exactly. So this is a great opportunity to I to be in a collaborative environment. Yeah, I'm I've got the ideas and the designs and stuff, but I'm still have this team. I love the team. I've always thought. I think of like Dale Chihuly, the glass guy.
Mhm.
Any of those glass stuff where it takes a huge team of people just to get these
Correct.
projects done. I've always thought that would be cool to be able to do more of that kind of stuff. And this mural was really the kind of the first time I did given the opportunity to do that. And that would be cool to I don't know if I'd call that a goal, but it would be something to be cool to
Alright.
continue to do.
No. So do you think that collaborative, process expanded the creative process for you?
Yeah, it really did. Yeah, it really did. I think because you've got more brains coming into the picture, right? And
True.
even the non-artists that were, I mean, like a good friend of mine who's a historian, a researcher, helped me with the thinking of ideas and thinking of different things to include or even think about the way the mural was put together in ways that I wouldn't have thought about because I'm not a
Mhm.
historian. I know a little bit of that history, but bringing in those different ideas and those different voices to me, mm, yes, was definitely a boon to my creativity, and it made the project a lot better. I think because you did have that, and then the kids that helped had their own little stylistic things they would add in there
Right.
that were just something that I wouldn't have been able or even thought of doing otherwise.
That's very cool. A lot of minds, a lot of working creative minds coming together, I think
Hmm.
produces a end result that's unexpected.
Yeah,
What are some of the pieces that you're really surprised got the attention that it got?
meaning over my career.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Or pieces that you thought were gonna get a response and didn't?
oh, there's probably a lot more of those.
Ah,
Uh, I don't know. It's as I've done it over the years, it feels like the things that, and I'm thinking mostly about things you really sort of invest in. You think, oh, this is a great idea. this is going to go over big, or it's going to win this
Right.
award or
You're really
whatever.
making a statement. Yeah.
Really making a statement is like, it's like crickets, so that happens. But then sometimes people do get it and understand, like the one of my mom, but you don't look
Mhm.
Indian, that painting. When I did that, it was like I wanted to make a big statement. I wanted to make it like basically a big self-portrait, even though it's my
Right.
mom. It was really all this all this identity stuff is embedded all in the painting, and it showed a couple of places. And but I didn't. It's kind of interesting about art anyway, and maybe songwriting is similar, that once you do it and it's done, you don't really have any control over it anymore.
Mm.
It's out
Mhm.
there, and
Right.
I found that I've been able to, I think, give that up, those expectations up. That if I do it and I'm happy with the way it's turned out, I'm okay with what the reception is. And thankfully, a lot of times the reception's been okay, been good. It's been being collected by a museum or put into a collection somewhere, or in the case of this painting at Council Oak, it's there for people that come in and enjoy, that probably would never go into a museum or whatever.
Right.
It's one of those situations where that piece specifically has probably had more impact than anything I could have ever sort of expected for it. So yeah, I think to me, the artworks are like, sort of like your kids, right? You do them, you raise them best you can, and send them out in the world, and then
Right.
what happens happens.
Go out.
Yeah, go out and do whatever.
Live your life. Yeah, you can't say, "Oh, well, I think you should put it here or this room or they hang it this way," They have
Yeah,
a life
no,
on their own, and
yeah,
they're
and
set
that's
forth and
okay.
be free.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way it should be. You know, I don't think you can control your well, you can't. I know you can't control the art itself, but and you can't really control the people's reaction to it either. I mean, you can hope there's a certain reaction, but you never
Correct.
really
Right.
know. I've listened to curators talk about my work, and it's when it's in different shows and stuff, and
Mhm.
it's and what they and I think this is, everybody's has their own, and maybe that's what's great about art. Everybody sort of sees an art piece and they have their own sort of reaction to it, or interpretation or whatever. I mean, that's cool. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. You hope that people don't totally misread stuff, and thankfully, I haven't had that happen really too
Right,
often.
right.
But at some point, you don't control it. You make it, you put it out there, and then hopefully somebody enjoys it enough to let you do more of it.
Correct, correct. So besides the photographs, what else is the story that you're telling in your artwork? What comes from you, and is there an ongoing theme that you're trying to relay that's a definitive Bobby C. Martin piece of artwork?
Well, I have realized that the art I make a lot of times is therapeutic for me, because it is about my family and my family story, and the history that's not just specifically my family, but even broader tribal history.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's part of why I'm really continue to do, because the family photos are very personal, obviously, but they're also not just mine.
Correct.
I've had people say, you're selling a painting of your mom? Isn't that weird? It's like, well, maybe, but it's not just my mom. It could be anybody's mom. So,
Right.
so I think, I don't know, for me, the telling my story in some ways has been therapeutic, and it's turned out that it's been helpful, or at least other people have identified with that and be able to
And
uh,
connect, I think.
connect. Yes, connect's a good way to put that. Connect with that, and that's been really satisfying. And probably when I first started using these old photos, I never would have even thought of that. It's just sort of organically grown into that. And then it's um, being able uh, to me, making art is sort of a form of in some ways a form of worship for me personally too. It's very spiritual, I think. Whether that shows at on the receiving end, I don't know for sure. Although I have talked, we've actually done we've done one show in particular with a couple of friends of mine that called Altars of Reconciliation, where we did put together a show that was about our experiences as Native Americans, but also as Christians growing up I kind of come from a Indian Baptist background. That's
Right.
my so that part of that is just kind of wrapped up in, but it really comes down for me to it's just really it's fulfilling to make the art and to be able to
Hmm.
put it out there and other people enjoy it has just been like, wow, that's that's crazy. That's crazy that can even happen.
Do you feel that it's put you more in touch into your Native American roots and heritage?
In Yeah, and in my of course my Native American roots and heritage are more into the Christianity and in the Indian church.
Mhm.
In a sense, that's my tradition and heritage versus not. I wouldn't say versus. That's a bad way to say that. But well, I guess that's not a bad way to say it because there is that sort of tension a lot of times between
Mhm.
traditional um, stomp dances and things like that, and then in the church. So
Right.
there is that kind of maybe a tension that's part of that whole when you talk about tradition. What tradition? And for me, yeah, it's really connected me a lot with a church tradition, but also with just through the history, and through all the just knowing that the people in these photos are just some of them are only a couple of generations removed from being forced to leave their homelands.
Mhm.
It's not like some ancient story. I
Right,
mean,
right.
it's pretty. It's not
It's
that
still
long
fairly
ago.
recent,
Yeah, and
given the
some
timeline.
of that stuff is still playing out in our political landscape today.
True.
So all that is played into this um, getting a deeper understanding of who I am as a Native person and where I came from and whose shoulders I'm standing on to be able to
Mhm.
do the things I get to do. Yeah, so the art has played a huge part in that.
Do you feel that, Native American art is playing a big enough role in society, both on the national scale and overall global scale now, because of the resurgence and the continued build of the renaissance of a Native American art? That's not just a roadside shop selling Native American art, that there's more and more, national
Yeah.
artists coming on board onto the scene.
hmm I think, there's never enough,
Yeah,
but,
true.
but I think there's certainly more of a bigger stage. A lot of my friends that, and especially younger, I mean, I'm super happy to see. I've got several friends that one just got through being able to be featured at the Whitney Museum in a show, and that are curating big shows, go to major
Mhm.
museums. So those are all pretty new things. It's only been happening in the past few years where there have been suddenly these national and international venues that are available to not just
Right,
Native
yeah.
artists, but Native curators, Native art historians. So that's encouraging. Um, Hopefully, it's not just sort of a fad of the moment. That it's something that,
Right.
but I think for me anyway, as I've seen it, people are noticing, and when they get when we've been given the opportunity, it's like people say, "Oh, I've never seen this before. This is amazing. Where has this been? It's been out
Mhm.
here in Oklahoma the whole time."
Right, right.
But for people in other parts of the country and the world to see this, it's a new thing, and it is, I hope, something that continues to grow.
Mhm.
If nothing else, at least be given a a good chunk of time at the table, because
Correct.
that's even a new thing, just to be able to be at the table talking about and being in the same conversation um, is is a pretty new development.
Correct. Well, like you said, it's not a new factor. It's been around for quite some time. I
Mhm.
think the recognition has just expanded, and the
That-
exposure and the level of recognition has, when we're on a national platform of seeing
mhm.
artists in major museums
Right.
and exhibits and being part of that story of the art culture. We're not
Hmm.
just a niche anymore. We're
Yeah.
actually a fortified art culture. So I think that's an
Hmm.
important factor
Yep.
that's
I
kind of
agree.
helped
Hmm.
you and many others that have kind of paved the wave in the path for the next generation.
I hope so. I hope so that the folks that come after me have a lot more opportunities. I mean, that's something that you always hope that you can knock some doors open or
Right,
create
right,
some opportunities that folks, because my wife tells me this all the time and reminds me, and I know it's true, but we do all stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. So
right.
somebody has got to be able to be willing, and whatever little part I played, I'm thankful for. But just to be able to see folks have that opportunity that come after me, I mean, that's amazing. It's cool to think
Well,
that those opportunities are continuing to grow.
they're continuing to grow, and I think it also helps continue developing the story.
Hmm.
The story didn't end with first contact or removal. Our story is continuing. It's
Exactly.
continuing to grow, and it's going to go for generations and generations more,
Yeah.
obviously. But
Yeah.
with you and your generation and the next generation, I think our art, our culture, and our heritage will just keep moving forward as it should.
As it should, and as it always has.
Yes, exactly. And some people just don't understand that. It's like, "Oh, you ended." It's like, "No, we're still
Well,
here.
yeah,
We're still
exactly.
creating."
And that's really kind of what the story I want to tell with that Council Oak mural too is, resilience, yes, but not just resilience. Resilience sometimes, yeah, is survive, but survive
Mhm.
is not the same as blossoming or thriving. And I think a lot of
Correct.
our tribes have done that, going from this horrific experience to a place where they are not only just they didn't just make it, they just didn't
Right.
just drag themselves in, they're thriving and helping their people, and that comes with standing on the shoulders of people that
Mhm.
or and that's why I wanted on this, on the mural. It started with, and I want to title this, and I haven't. It's not official yet, but this will be the first place I can. And the title I think is going to call Unbroken,
Nice.
Unbroken, the Council Oak story, or something like that. So,
I can see
and I
that.
haven't
I get it.
finished yet, but I'm going to put some QR codes. We're going to embed some QR codes in those panels that people can
Mhm.
then kind of find out more about not just the history of the Council Oak, but the history of the tribe and how it that history the story arc of that ends up with and under the tree I've got all these little silhouettes, and those are multiple generations of my family, but
Mhm.
it could be any of our families that
Correct, correct,
just talks about how these generations make us who we are.
correct. Absolutely. Like you said, yeah, the Council Oak wasn't the beginning of the story. There was a story before that,
Hmm.
and it was part of that story as it continued forward. You
Right.
mentioned, Muskogee, market coming up.
Hmm.
So do you do the whole market circuit?
I pick and choose. I do.
It takes a lot. It's a
It
lot of
takes a
work.
lot of energy. I
Yeah.
mean, we've talked about my wife and I've talked about maybe getting on that a little more once I retire. I really like. I mean, I don't think I could do a market circuit like it's like some of friends of mine who do lots and lots, especially in the summertime. I
Mhm.
do Muskogee Art Market now that this is its second year, so it'll be a regular for me. I do Santa Fe Indian Market. I've been doing that for about 10 years. I do Cherokee Art Market at the Hard Rock Casino in
Mhm.
October. And typically, sometimes the Chickasaws have a couple of good markets that I do occasionally, but usually 3 or 4 a year. and I really
That's a
do.
good run.
I like this the opportunity to visit with people,
Hmm.
and, and hear what they say about their reaction to the art and their own stories, that come out, because that's fun for me to hear their family stories,
Hmm.
um, that maybe has been jogged in their memory from seeing something that I put out there. So, but yeah, I like the markets. I don't know that I'd ever be a full-time marketer, but I
Well,
do enjoy the ones that I do.
I think it's a good aspect for the artist to connect to the audience where you
Hmm.
don't get it if you're doing an exhibit or in a showroom
Yeah.
or other type of venue. So it's a good way to, like you said, to hear their story and hear their
Hmm.
interpretation and translation of your pieces and
Yeah.
other things. So I think it's a good way to get exposure, obviously, but
Yeah.
also connect to the outside world.
Yeah. I think you're right. That's perfectly. I love just talking to people because they were really interested in you and your art too.
Hmm.
I try to tell it to my students, because that's something that they usually have never had a chance to do, is like talk about their own art and talk about just their ideas so much. And
Right,
so,
right.
and it's a big deal because people want to know. People are very
Yeah,
interested in hearing about how you come up with your ideas or what this means in your art. And those kind of you know things are really, like you said, those markets give you that opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations that are
right.
you don't have if you
Right.
ship a work off to a museum show somewhere. You never have any idea who even sees it, much less talk to them.
Well, I mean, that was one of the reasons for the development of this show is connecting to artists to hear their stories,
That's
to
great.
understand them as artists, to kind of give them the exposure, obviously, but to hear the various factors of Native American art and artists and what
Yeah.
drives them. So,
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate you doing that.
oh, our pleasure. So, are you represented anywhere, exhibits currently?
Um, let's see. I have work in the Exhibit C gallery in Oklahoma City. That is the Chickasaw Nation operates that. I have a gallery in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that carries my work. Art Ventures is the name of it. Then I have a traveling show, that Altars of Reconciliation show that I had mentioned, with Aaron Shaw and Tony Tiger, and
Mhm.
that's traveling for the next couple of years around the country.
Fantastic.
And it's at the Knights of Columbus Museum right now, which I didn't know there was ever such a thing, but it's kind of
All
cool.
right.
But anyway, so that's going to be traveling around for a while. And what else? There's a show coming up at Living Arts in June that I'm going to have some work in. It's called Beyond the Whitewash. It's one of the Tulsa Artist Fellows. It's putting a show, kind of a collaborative show together, talking about
Uh-huh.
her experience as a deep South white woman, trying to collaborate with all these people of color and talk about, well, issues of racism and how and systemic, you know. Well, I'm not going to speak for her because it's a cool idea. It's a cool idea.
Right.
She's trying to, um, I don't know, not calm her conscience or anything, but I think she really does want to try and give voice to not only sort of her sort of deep South white heritage, and
Mhm.
how especially in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Interesting.
how those voices can respond to that. And so I'm going to put a couple of pieces in
Interesting.
that. So, yeah, and then of course this weekend I got a booth at the Winter
Selling your
Spirit
goods.
Casino.
Yep.
We're selling the goods, but yeah, it is a good chance. I mean, last year I had a really good turnout, and I got to talk to a lot of Creek people. A lot of Creek people. Even it's kind of like even though I've lived here most of my life, mostly been in Tahlequah, but I've mostly shown my work outside the area. So a lot of my Muskogee cousins
Mhm.
never seen the work, so it was cool to be able to kind of be in the heartland.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Bobby C., any closing words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom. Well,
What do
go
you
with
tell
the
your
flow.
students?
Go with the flow. I tell my students to
Get to work?
get to work. Yeah, exactly. Get this work done. But I mean, that's a good point. I mean, keep working. I have I love a quote. It's by an artist that I've admired for a long time. His name's Chuck Close. He was big in the '60s and '70s. He did these ginormous portraits of Polaroid pictures, and that's maybe part of where I got my idea. Anyway, his famous quote is, uh, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just get to work."
Interesting.
And so, you can't wait around for this bolt of lightning to
Yeah.
hit. You got to work. The inspiration will hit you wherever, as long as you continue to work. So
Hmm.
that's my words of wisdom. Just do the
That's
work.
good.
Do the work.
Yeah,
The
that's a good
inspiration
one.
will come. Inspiration will come. Right.
We'll go with it. We'll go with it. Well, Bobby C., it's been a thrill to have you on the show, and I thoroughly appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Appreciate
thank
you
you for
asking
joining
me.
us today.
Yeah, you bet.
Absolutely. Well, you take care of yourself, and we will talk soon.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.